This side of the House wants Malaysia to spend vast amounts of money on power plants which will take 2 decades to produce any useful energy, on a mechanism of energy production that will frankly not be suited to Malaysia, a country which already has huge reserves of its own energy. I'm, in my substantive, going to be talking about how nuclear power is particularly inflexible and why that's not good for Malaysia, and also the opportunity cost as to developing renewables and better meeting the environmental imperative of this debate. But firstly, to my rebuttal. I'm going to first talk about energy availability and security and then the environmental issues of this debate. So, energy availability and security. The very simple first point that Tim and I have made and will continue to make in this debate is that, quite simply put, Malaysia does not have energy security issues. They have a vast, proven oil reserve, vast, the largest that has been recently discovered. This side of the House's only response to that availability point was, oh, the other bits, the ones in the South China Sea, are unproven. They're unproven insofar as we're not really sure how big they are, but we have like a 90% certainty that they are there, because smart people like geologists can surmise that a particular area that tends towards a particular geological phenomena will render that in other circumstances. So the South China Sea deposits are not a mystery to science or to engineering. We can reasonably presume that they are there. Even if they are not, we would still rely on the vast reserves that Malaysia has already discovered. This side of the House then said Malaysia gets huge benefit from being a first mover. Tim pointed out quite lucidly that that first move was made about 60 years ago in Western Europe. There was no response from that on this side of the House. What you're sacrificing when you spend billions of dollars being a 20th mover on something that you don't really need to is the money that you could be giving to places like this to research into renewable energy. That's the sacrifice you're making, but I'll be going into that in my substantive. This side of the House then said it will get cheaper, nuclear energy that is. That is ignoring the huge cost up front, billions and billions of dollars, not overall but per plant, and that's just the construction, not the ongoing maintenance and safety. We pointed out that there is not as much reliability and predictability both in the supply and the cost of the supply of uranium. We pointed out that Canada and Australia have made moves towards being a little bit restrictive as to who and how they sell their uranium. This side of the House was happy to rely on that, and also the Congo. Responses to the first two, Canada and Australia, not only have they said, as I said, that they will have restricted selling policies, but also the political climate in my country, and I gather in Canada, is fiercely anti-nuclear. And with the ascendance of left parties in both of those states, or the influence of them, even if they're not in government, means that they are not willing to sell nuclear energy to a lot of people. I am pretty happy to say that the Congo is not a reliable source of energy and probably won't be in the foreseeable future, nor other parts of that part of Africa. So, they then said that it leaves us to export a lot of Malaysia's oil. Domestic consumption, even if all of Malaysia bathed in oil every day, would be a literal drop in the ocean of what Malaysia exports every year. It is utterly negligible. We do not think we are imperiling, really, the net amount of export and export dollars that Malaysia gains from selling its oil. Also, Harish seems to want Malaysia to ship all its oil out post-haste and just get rid of it. OPEC deliberately restricts the continual supply of oil in order to keep the cost up. That would be entirely counterproductive. And I imagine Malaysia, the rest of the good people of OPEC, would be a little bit irritated at you. Turning to the question of safety. No, thank you. I will take the opening half, I promise. So, we say that the risk, yes, of accidents is small, but the outcome of those accidents is grave. We told you that France has 12 minor to medium nuclear accidents a year. The problem is, though, they have no guarantee at any one time that one of those won't go Chernobyl on them. And that is the risk that we are taking for no measurable benefit to Malaysia's energy security. Also, to distinguish it from the Gulf Coast, first of all, the Gulf Coast is deep sea drilling, which is a lot more difficult and a lot more hard to upkeep, and Malaysia is the continental shelf, which is much shallower. That is one principal difference. But also, I'm happy to venture that the disaster in the Gulf Coast had a smaller human cost in that fewer people died than in Chernobyl. More to the point, huge swathes of Russia are now non-viable, Belarus actually, are now non-viable because that happened 30 years ago. That is not the case with with the Gulf Coast insofar as oil is still being drilled there. So turning to the environment, frankly, and Tim said this and we didn't really get a response, that it is a secondary consideration to Malaysia, and it should be. Why? Because they weren't the ones that polluted our atmosphere and created carbon in the first place. Also, Malaysia is a drop in the ocean. Great country, but you guys can do all you want to reduce fossil fuel emissions and it will make, frankly, no net difference. So that imperative is not even met, right? Also, you're sacrificing money which could be better spent on stuff that actually has an environmental impact. So you are not meeting the imperative, and even if you do build them all, and even if Malaysia suddenly starts contributing much more to carbon output, the nuclear power plants would not reduce it for another 20 years until they go online. So you're not particularly doing anything useful. No, thank you. On to my substantive material. Nuclear power is really, really inflexible. No, thank you. The plants, by necessity, are big. They're going to be there for a very long time, and they can't be converted to other energy production. Why is that bad for Malaysia? Because Malaysia is developing incredibly fast. And the shape, actually the physical shape of their cities and their location and the way that they spread will change. That means that the locations of energy demand, the locations of where people want to live and the demands of transporting that energy will change in ways that I imagine that the people in Malaysia can't actually predict particularly usefully right now. I'll take the opening now.
Okay. Or? Isn't that thing about, you don't know where demand is going to grow up? Isn't that an argument against building any power plants ever? No, because nuclear power plants are very, very large and cannot be dismantled and moved. I tell you what can be with relative ease, huge fields of solar panels. They've done it in Australia and South Australia. You can literally dismantle them, pick them up and move them with relative ease as opposed to a nuclear power plant. That is the difference. So the change will be fast, the change will be unpredictable. Energy supply needs to be flexible and needs to be adaptable, and nuclear energy simply cannot be that. Moreover, renewables just need smaller units to create energy than nuclear power because you need the big reactor. So, very briefly, developing renewables and opportunity cost. Tim mentioned this already in his speech, but this is basically that given how much money energy research needs and energy production and infrastructure needs, you're engaging in a huge misallocation of lots and lots of funds when you send billions of dollars into a nuclear industry that as yet does not exist, when Malaysia could become the actual first mover in a lot of renewable energy technology. Malaysia already has an incredible high-tech sector. We imagine they are more than able to invest their money in things that will actually benefit the environment, that will actually be useful within 3, 4, 5 years, not in 15 or 16. It's like allocation of the pie, and those arguments sound facile, but we were talking about billions and billions of dollars being misspent by the government. That's not a particularly good usage of taxpayers' money, and it is an unwise investment for the future of Malaysia because it is so inflexible. When Cancun tried to establish a global fund to fight the ravages of global warming, this means Malaysia may be able to give just that little bit less, and that's the problem with this policy. Malaysia doesn't need it, Malaysia shouldn't want it.